The movie opens up with a flashback to the time when our protagonist, Victor, was a little boy. On one fateful day, he and his family get into an accident as their car falls off a bridge. Although Victor manages to survive, his father doesn't make it in the present. A teenage Victor has nightmares about the accident and has developed a paralyzing fear of heights. One morning, he refuses to go to school because the students are being taken on an excursion to the nearby mountains. There, they plan to watch the solar eclipse, but Victor is afraid his phobia will kick in when they reach the top. However, his mom makes him change his mind by promising that his father will always be there to protect him. Meanwhile, 1,000 years in the past, a shaman casts a spell that will help him find a powerful artifact named the Stone of Power. He plans to use it to rule the whole world. The fire in front of him forms the shape of a dragon head, which matches the image on Victor's jacket in the present day. After walking through the forest for a while, the group reaches a bridge. However, Victor freezes in the middle of it because of his phobia. This forces Vova to drag him back to the start of the bridge while the entire class laughs at him. Embarrassed, Victor runs into the forest and hides from everyone else near a cliff. Soon afterwards, Vovacek finds his friend and tries to console him. However, their chat is interrupted as the solar eclipse begins. Suddenly, a massive earthquake hits the area. Logic falls off the edge of the cliff and holds onto the rocks just in time. Victor wants to help him, but his phobia of heights keeps him frozen, and before he can muster the courage to do anything, a magical portal opens behind him and absorbs Victor along with Vorchek's megaphone. When Victor opens his eyes again, he finds himself on the same cliff, but 1,000 years in the past. Nearby, there's a man in armor named Alessio being attacked by a group of enemy soldiers called humans. Well, Lesko, being a crafty swordsman, defeats these soldiers easily. But things get complicated when he's attacked by their leader in Deck, who quickly overpowers him and brings more soldiers as backup. At that moment, Victor trips while trying to get a better look at the fight and accidentally activates the megaphone. This distracts the soldiers and gives Alesko a chance to escape. Luckily, he has a horse and picks up Victor before the Cuban soldiers can get their hands on him. After a while, Victor and Velasco reach a river where the latter summons the water spirit to form a path for them to pass. This path disappears once they've crossed, forcing Anthony and the humans to give up on the chase for the time being. Following this, a Lashkert takes Victor to his village, which is protected by a stronghold. Victor's garments and way of talking are viewed as strange by the residents, and they fear he might be a spy. Hence, they throw him in prison until they decide what to do. Meanwhile, Annette goes to see the shaman to discuss the failure of their mission, but the shaman surprisingly reacts happily when he hears about the boy in weird clothes. He believes that Victor is the person that will guide them to the Stone of Power. Sometime later, Victor is visited by Alenka, a young local girl who brings him milk and makes sure he's doing fine. Soon afterwards, a Lescott comes to pick him up and takes him to the river for a test. The water spirit will decide if he's a spy or if he's trustworthy. Once they reach the river, he is thrown into the water with his hands tied, but the river spirit considers him worthy and throws him out without hurting him. He then claims that he's from 1,000 years in the future. At first they don't believe him, but when he uses his microphone, they are taken aback. Victor then asks for a way to return to his own time, and of course, he promises to look into it. Later in the evening, a Lashkert comes with some news after talking to the river spirit. As the days pass, Victor spends his time in the village, learning to use the sword and the bow. He also gets to see the stronghold's watchtower, which is so tall that it can help them keep an eye on the whole kingdom. After the training sessions are over, Victor leaves the village. He's on the lookout for the mage using a map that Alessio had shown him. Fortunately, he comes across Alenka while she's gathering mushrooms and convinces her to be his guide, as she knows the area well without noticing. The shaman spy, Raven, that's following them. The teens walk for a few hours until they enter a passage between two huge rock walls. Victor suddenly finds himself in a desolate land, which is an illusion cast by a mage who lives nearby. He can hear strange voices in his mind. The voices say that if he wants knowledge, he must confess his greatest fear without lying, without hesitation. Victor shares the story of the car crash and his fear of heights. The mage approves of the boy for having accepted his weakness and shares the information he's looking for. However, when Victor asks where the stone can be found, the mage replies in a riddle. He says it can be found where the wingless make their nest and will be seen when Victor rides the wind. Only someone able to touch another heart with his own can reach the Stone of Power as soon as the mage finishes saying the riddle. Victor returns to the forest with Blanca when he shares the riddle. She guesses that the nest for the wingless must refer to a nearby village named Stork Village. A few hours later, the duo makes it to the village. Victor makes a kite on the spot and uses it to ride the wind, just like the riddle said. Soon afterwards, the kite automatically falls into a small pond nearby. He then jumps into the water, follows the string attached to the kite, and finally finds the stone of power. Unbeknownst to Victor, the shaman spirit then sees all of this and flies to tell his master. As soon as the news reaches the shaman, he sends a bunch of Cuban soldiers to steal the stone. Just like he had hoped for, these ruthless warriors not only kidnap Victor and 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽, but also light the stork village on fire. Fortunately, thanks to the watchtower, the soldiers at the stronghold learn about the attack and immediately send their warriors. When everybody gets back to the fortress after the victory, 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽 vows to direct Victor so he can find the portal that he came from, but obviously suggests they need to wait for a storm because the god that made the stone was the master of thunder. In the next scene, he suggests that the best spot to hide the stone of power is on top of the watchtower. But when Victor refuses to go up there with him, he reminds the young boy that confronting one's fears is important. Soon afterwards, Victor and 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽 manage to make it to the top, where the latter hides the stone under a pile of rocks. Unfortunately, the shaman sees all of this in his magical fire. A few hours later, a heavy hailstorm arrives. The big hailstone strike the captured 𝐷 in his cage, causing him great pain. That night, a flash of lightning hits the pile of rocks on top of the watchtower. The stone of power, along with other rocks, falls near the cage too. Irene cunningly uses the debris to break the lock and escape. He takes several things from the village, including the stone of power, along with other pieces of rocks before fleeing. The next morning, people in the stronghold find out that 𝐷, Green, and the stone are gone. Despite this, Victor and 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽 concentrate on finishing the flying machine because it's their only hope to recover the stone without a war. Sometime later, he and 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽 go out to gather berries and some moss there. They're ambushed by a group of humans that kidnap 𝐷. There he's asked to activate the stone if he wants 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽 to live. But Victor cleverly pulls out the fireworks from his bag, lights them, and throws them at the soldiers to create chaos. They're captured by an DC, who gives them a final chance to activate the stone. Victor doesn't know what to do until he recites the riddle in his head and realizes the heart-to-heart part means the magic of the human bond. He approaches 𝐓𝐴𝐤𝐽, and when they hold the stone together, the magic inside it finally comes to life. At this moment, shaman snatches the stone away, and an 𝐴𝐤𝐽 orders 𝐷 to kill the teenagers. However, 𝐷 can't bring himself to do it because he remembers how kind Victor had been to him. Instead, he frees the two prisoners and gets them a horse. The next day, along with the Cuban army comes a giant golem, a massive beast made out of rocks that the shaman controls with the power of the stone. The beast takes a huge boulder and throws it at the stronghold gate, destroying it completely. Sensing the imminent danger, Alaska leaves the stronghold and makes the golem chase him. He expertly dodges every slow attack until he makes the beast trip and fall into the river, where the water spirit captures it. At that moment, a new eclipse begins and 𝐷𝐴𝐤𝐽 orders his army to attack the stronghold. However, the villagers bravely defend their home under the leadership of the three knights when an 𝐴𝐤𝐽 realizes that he's about to lose. He decides to abandon the battle, but the shaman manages to bring the golem out of the water for another attack. Seeing this, Victor plans to climb to the top of the watchtower and use the flying machine to get to the shaman. Overseas words of support ring in his mind and help him overcome his fear, allowing Victor to climb on the flying machine and jump off the wall. The machine flies just as smoothly as he had hoped for. He soon lands on the cliff where the shaman is standing. Victor then pushes him off to his death and finally recovers the stone of power. Unfortunately, 𝐷𝐴𝐤𝐽 arrives at the cliff as well, intending to steal the stone. The two struggle for a while, and Victor eventually throws it into the water to safeguard it. With the power of this stone now gone, the golem immediately disintegrates into ashes. Enraged that his plans have been foiled, and proceeds to launch his attack on Victor. But before he can do so, Alaska arrives at the scene. The two men then engage in a fierce battle, and in the end, and Jack falls to his death the same way the shaman did. In the aftermath, Belasco takes Victor to the forest, where the magical portal is present, and as soon as Victor enters the portal, he is transported back to the present, where Wolfcheck is still hanging on the edge of the cliff. Now that he isn't scared of heights anymore, he bravely manages to save his friend. This earns Victor an ovation from the rest of the class, who are watching from the other side of the cliff.